Hey boardies, welcome to AmassGames. My name is Simon. Today I'm going to set up, play and review for the game Dominant Species. Now this is a game designed by Chad Jensen. It is published by GMT Games. This one happens to be the second edition, 4th printing, 2021. So you may see a different version depending on what you may come across. And it's a game that takes about 2 to 4 hours. I would generally say it's more on the longer stint of it. And as this is going to be a complete how to set up, play and review, obviously it's going to take a little bit of time to set up, but it isn't actually that long, which is why I am choosing to do so. The only thing I've done in advance is just to make sure it all fits on camera. So this is a game which you can play, I think, 2 to 6 players. I recommend it. It's recommended with more in terms of those who have played it more, but I think it's quite nice as a 2. I play Dominant Species Marine, which I will compare them both later on. And I will be setting this up just as a 2 as well. So there is a 2-player variant whereby you can play multiple species, various colours you can play as. I'm going to use red and yellow just because it's going to stand out from the board. And the aim of the game is to get the most points. And that's going to be triggered once we have gone through these Dominant Species Dominance cards deck. So you can remove 4 for a shorter game. There's certain cards that you will be removing. And there's a survival card, which is going to go at the bottom. We're going to shuffle up and deal out these 5 cards over here. If you have any questions, as always, do let me know via the comments of S in YouTube. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for further videos, including by GMT. And also make sure you check out the podcast, Instagram, etc. to obviously follow along. But there might be some errata updates, so do check out that little tag showing you about that. Now, there are there's no dice in the game relating to dominance, which is a very important part of the game. And I've always found it very handy to use alternative dice. I know other people do that too. So there is one negative about that game in particular, that element to it. Also, you can actually be setting out these hexagonal tiles with these Wanderlust tiles already, but I'm choosing not to, just the name of speed. And I've already decided who I'm going to play with regarding these species. So yeah, we're playing various things. It's 90,000 years ago, it's an ice age, and what we're looking to do is adapt and evolve, very much like the game Evolution, which came out afterwards. And we're trying to obviously see if we can adapt against our opponents and beat them for various territory. There's various these tiles which are going to be placed face down. I will show you some examples in a second. So you're dealing 8 into each of these locations, but just imagine I have done that all equally already. So, like I said, its aim of the game is to get the most points. There's worker placement going on. You're going to go to various locations, which helps you to adapt. And just coming back to that game Evolution, or the Sets of Evolution franchise, you might also want to check out my various videos on the channel for that too. Check out the How to Set Up, Play and Review playlist. And for this one in particular, the GMT playlist, if there isn't one already, you will find one. So these various tiles we will be going out exploring, and you'll be getting points, for example, 7 points if you have the most, or dominating most, 4 for coming second, 3 for coming third, and that's why some people prefer it with more players, because there's more things to fight over. Sometimes a sea tile might have 9 points, you might have wetland worth 8, etc. So these will be flipped over. You're going to flip one over at random, and let's just say those were those ones. Of course, these would also be placed out too. So everything else I put back in the box relating to the various other player colours. And here are the various people you can play as. You can play as the amphibians, you can play as the insects, etc. If you see my unboxing teaser trailer preview video, it does tell you a little bit about what this is all about. Now, I have zoomed out, so hopefully the quality is okay. We're filming in full HD. Can't film in 4K zoomed out, unfortunately, but there's various different factions, various different types of species or genesis that we can play as. So we can play as the birds, we can play as the mammals, insects, reptiles, amphibians, and arachnids. They all do something slightly different, which you will hear me talk about in this game. But for example, the only thing you won't find on the board will be the amphibians, which start off with 3 kind of trait markers. So they're particularly strong in the water to start off with. Everyone else is going to start off with 2 traits. So these guys are good on grass. And as you can see, we have other things such as being good in the heat or the sun, and various other things which they could be good with grubs, on grass, that kind of stuff too. So you've seen how the game ends. You've seen we're trying to get the most points. There's various other tokens to look at, such as these cones, etc. Now, some people have said they don't think cones are very good. I think they're quite effective. You're going to take one of your markers representing your score marker, and it's going to go on 0. So that's pretty much almost out of shot. Doesn't matter, it's just down the bottom right-hand corner. You're also going to take 3 cylinders, and you're going to be using these to be placing out to various locations, blocking those spaces, and taking those action points. I may have mentioned already that if I am speaking too fast, you can, of course, slow us down or rewatch. You're also going to take these various tokens. representing a certain colour, but you can place them on a neutral white if you prefer to play that colour as well. So we're going to play with a couple of colours. We're going to play insects. They're going to be going first because they are lower in turn order, which is a tiebreaker. And then we also happen to have the amphibians, so we're going to place them out too as well. Like I said, you can flip them over if you want to. Everything else is just going to go out of the bag or back in the bag if you are not using it. Now, in terms of accessories, you can also check out my accessories playlist just whilst I'm still setting up, which you might find of interest. So we have these cubes. Like I said, these are locating to decide what we're doing on our turns, and these represent dominance, which I will come back on to telling you about what that means too. So other things to set up. Well, like I said, it is set 90,000 years ago, and we are trying to be dominant. So obviously the dinosaurs were millions and millions of years ago, 65 million years ago, but we're now trying to see who is going to be dominating via these action point cylinders to define who is going to be the best when the endgame trigger, as I mentioned, once we get through these cards. I did briefly mention about the duration of the game. So that happens once that final card is drawn, because there's various actions you can take, but you'll not be taking all the actions. There are more action options than there are tokens or options you can be taking, which means that unless you're hitting domination, you are not resolving one of these cards, which will slow the game down. So a good hint is I typically try and go here fairly often, not necessarily every turn, but just to try and see if I can help speed up that first play for some people. So depending on the player count, like if you're playing as a 2, for example, you're playing with 7 cylinders, taking 7 turns, and you're going to play with all 55 cubes. But if you're playing as a 6, you're playing with 3 and 35 cubes, and that's all illustrated on page 4 of the rulebook. Yes, of course, you could just check the rulebook yourself for this, but after that won't include the review and any kind of tips I might have as well, such as using those dice. So in terms of where you're going to be placing out your pieces, well, we're going to start off with the insects, and they're going to be placing 2 on Savannah. So they're starting off in the Savannah, munching away and eating, obviously, stuff like here, representing 2 here. Again, that would normally be covered over with one of these tiles, so we could do that right now to show you. So that goes there, and as you can see, there's a bit of grass going on, which we already know they are strongest at. And then we're also going to be placing it on surrounding areas because everything happens to be a little bit of desert, so they can handle a bit of that. They can handle a bit of wetland. They're not too good in forest, etc. in this particular setting or theme for the game. Any cones and cubes not using and put back in the box. And now we're starting off with that phase order. We're defining who is going to go first. So we can start seeing what is available on the board, these various kind of tokens. We've got a tundra tile stack off to one side, which I'm just leaving out of shot for the time being. But these are tiles that can come out, which is quite important, as I'll explain later. For a start, you could control it for a measly 1 point, but again, you must be dominating. Dominating is an important part, which I will come back onto. You also have a draw bag of various different tokens as well, different elements related to grass, grub, meat, seed, sun, and water, represented by these items here. Okay, so let's start taking you through the various actions that you can be doing. So the sequence of play is you're going to be planning, so you're thinking about what you want to be doing, i.e. picking one of these locations, then you're executing them. So once you've placed out all your things, you're then going to resolve them top to bottom. So somebody else might go here first, which means they're taking that first action. But then once we've done through all the executions, we're then going through the reset phase. I'll take you to what that one does too. So let's start off with initiative. If you want to, you could choose to bid for initiative. And that is something you might want to do by placing one of your cylinders on a space here. So you can only place them on these eye symbols, so they are limited, and it allows you to take certain actions, or maybe you want to take a first turn in that next round. So that is what you can do. You can remove any action points that were there, and it allows you to perform the following activities. So on the initiative track, you're going to swap your markers around, and of course you could choose to be more beneficial for that. I'll explain why that could be useful in a bit, but crucially it's around tie breaks. If you're equally dominant, equally amount of something else, then that can be where it is going to be simple and better for you. On to adaptation. So down onto this location here, we are going to also at this point would have spawned out various tiles. So we would have taken out of this bag various things. So we might actually find that we want to be adapting into certain terrains. So we might want to get some meat terrains, some grub, some more grub. And again, there's a finite amount of things in here, equal amounts, and a bit of sun. So now we know that we may want to adapt into that, and explain why that might be useful in a bit. So this happens to be obviously adaptation. It makes for a lot of sense. Very thematic if we're talking about a game about evolution, or in this case, obviously being dominant, because that's the key part of this game. This isn't, by the way, going in a family weight playlist. Okay, so adaptation, like I said, if you want to be placing your cylinder, one of your cylinders on here, so again, there will be 7 in a 2-player game, You can choose to do that, and of course what you're going to do is take one of those elements, and what you can do is now place it on your board. So it now means I'm adaptive and I can have some kind of influence or ability to survive in like a sun location. So on my turn, I might take this, and I might take a sun, which means I could be quite good on this, which I'll explain why in a moment, but it's around dominance. So it's very important, like I said, dominance. So next thing down, instead, I could choose to do regression. Now, again, we need to wait for these to have come down, but what these basically means is, if there happens to be any elements there, what's going to happen is you are going to be losing the effects. So you're actually going to be making you take off some of these elements from your board, from your little player board, which are not permanent. So if you happen to have anything on here, anything that's got not here for a future round, suddenly it means you have not adapted to that area, but by placing a cylinder on here, it kind of prevents one of those things. So if you see that's on here, and you've got a sun here, it stops you from losing such a trait. It's important to be aware of. So normally you are increasing your abilities up to 6, but you also want to start making sure that you're not going to be losing them. So again, you can choose to be losing things, and that's a big part of the game as well. Moving on to abundance. So again, we would have had some more tiles placed out here, and what these allows you to do is basically you can place it on a corner tile. So a corner tile of your choice, and that's important because if you start getting really good at grubs, you're able to place, say, grubs onto this corner or wherever it might be, and it's going to help you towards that dominant strategy. I.e., if another person happens to be having a lot of water, then you might be quite good on grass, but if you then actually have your worse on grass dominance, let's say your dominance value is 2 and their dominance value is 4, but you happen to have worth 3 suns or grubs, whatever it might be, then of course you are going to take it. That's important because then you will be getting 7 victory points and they might only be getting the 4 as an example. So it's very important to be aware of when you want to take abundance. I lost by 4 points in the prior game, maybe because they went quite a lot on abundance. So we are now onto wasteland. So similar, you can see these arrows at the end of the round, these are going to come down. And after all abundance actions have been performed, you're going to remove any action points that were there. You're going to move basically one of these elements currently in the wasteland box and putting it back into the draw bag. Then regardless of whether there was an action point placed in the section or not, the wasteland action will automatically occur, removing all elements from the tundra tiles that match those types. So anything that will be around it, which isn't permanent, then that will also disappear too. So you need to be aware of making sure you don't lose out stuff due to wasteland. Moving on to depletion, again, that can happen too. So after you've performed that wasteland action, again, it will happen anyway, you're going to move any action points that were here, and that player is going to select one element on Earth, this represents Earth, and place a matching element type in the depletion box, and that is removed from Earth and placed back in the draw bag. So you'll be able to pick something off the board. So again, it's a constant game of flux between being aware of what you're strong at and what your opponents are not strong at. So then thinking, well, actually, I'm going to remove their dominance or lower their dominance somewhere else. So someone's really strong at meat, you might take a meat off and suddenly they've actually got no dominance whatsoever because all they had were, let's say, 6 of those skull symbols here. So 6 of those out, that means they're actually worthless, which is why you need to have a bit of a blend and pick your battles crucially. Moving down, we happen to have glaciation. This is all to do with the tundra. And after any depletion action has been performed, you're moving the leftmost action point. So this one's going to go first. And what it's going to do is basically you're going to select a non-tundra tile that's adjacent to at least one other tundra tile. And you move and temporarily set aside all species from that tile. And then you're going to place a new tundra tile face up from the stack on top of that chosen tile. So this is something I don't tend to do too often. It's actually an ability you can get from cards. But what you are going to be doing is removing all elements from Earth that are surrounded by exactly 3 tundra tiles. So do watch out as you basically get more and more tundra tiles out, because if something happens to be adjacent to exactly 3 tundra tiles, then there's a chance that you could be at risk of someone doing the glaciation action and removing all elements from Earth surrounded by exactly 3 tundra tiles. So if it's something like this, then that's surrounded by exactly 3 tundra tiles. Now moving down, we happen to have speciation, so there's loads of things going on here. Now some things I hadn't mentioned was we've already passed the snake action, so there's various things that can be triggering on. So let's just go back and tell you a little bit about the snakes. So the action pawn benefit, what this basically means with the snakes is, or reptiles, is each action point in this section is preventing one such from being lost. But I guess they are very adaptive, the reptiles, are not being able to lose something. Moving on to speciation, which I played with the grasshoppers or with the insects last time. They basically can bounce and allowing you to bring out a species, one of your cubes, which represents one of your animals, into any other tile. Very helpful if you're trying to consider, again, dominance, because to be dominant, you must be present in a tile with one person else, which we'll come back onto again. I keep mentioning dominance. And like I said, after any glaciation performs, what you're now looking to do is thinking what you want to do. So what this allows you to do is, if you can pick any of these locations, it's going to go from left to right, but you can kind of do it at the same time. If you happen to have meat, this basically allows you to place 4 of these tokens, sorry, 4 species into the sea or wetland. So this is all about placing things out. So this is all about thinking, where do you want to place something out? So again, you can place up to 4 species in sea or wetland. So we've got wetland here. You can bring up 4 of your cubes here. You can bring up to 3 if the tile is savanna, jungle or forest, 2 if it's a desert or mountain, or 1 if the species is tundra. So that's all about wanting to bring up more species. Again, you do have a finite amount. In Dominant Species Marine, we have used up all our species, but I haven't seen it occur, I don't believe, in this game. Although it did nearly run out, because once these are lost, you'll not get these species back. So you've got 55 cubes in a 2-player game. Once they're gone, they are gone. You cannot get them back again. So be aware that you do have a finite amount of them. So, yes, like I said, when you remove your action point, you can choose any one element on Earth that matches the element type. So it has to be next to where you are, which represents one of these. So this could be next to here. And now you can place out 4 into, well, in this case, for a mountain, you can place up to 2. So that's what that's all about. So again, if you're playing as the insects, you can just jump any old place. It doesn't have to worry about certain requirements. And that's kind of all listed here. So you can see if it's in the sea, you can place 4. Let's move down to Wanderlust. So again, we would have actually had 4 things out as well. My opponent happened to do Wanderlust a lot, and into the later game, I started to do a bit more of this. So again, after speciation, you're going to be removing action points and then triggering these actions. So selecting a vacant white hex on the game board, that's basically grey actually, and allows you to consider bringing out a new tile. So you're going to select one of these empty spaces, and it must be adjacent to somewhere else, and it's got to be one of these 3 available, hence 3 spots. So this would be visible, let's say, and this allows you to think where you want to bring out more of your species into these locations. So let's say you bring out this one here and maybe move it here, because that's far enough away from somebody else, especially if you are playing against, so my opponent, if they're playing as the arachnids, you might want to place over here, because then they've got to get across. And this allows you to, in future turns, move your species onto there again, and now you could be competing for 3 points for domination over here, but you need to make sure that they're also on the same tile at the same time as well. So that's what Wanderlust is all about. You can select one of the available element discs in the Wanderlust selection, which we talked about over here, and you're going to gain bonuses based on the number of existing tiles adjacent. So here is one, and now imagine this had a tile out here, or it was a tile, then you are going to get points adjacent. So here it is down here, telling you how that works. You are adjacent to 2, so you're going to get yourself 3 victory points. So there's a few snazzy amount of points you can hoover up. I think I may have even lost that last game because somebody got 3 and I only got 2, so there are 3 points in it there, making a big chunk of that loss that I incurred. So that's all about Wanderlust. Like I said, you're bringing out an additional token to be placed out where you can consider competing over. Then let's move on to migration. So this allows you to bring out 7 more species. So what this can do is, we'll talk about birds in a second. What you're going to be doing then, so resolving Wanderlust, then what you can do is remove your token and you can bring out that amount of species anywhere on Earth where X equals a number. So for example, we've got 7 out here, so we can bring out 7 species, again, subject to your bag limit, which I generally find isn't a problem. Just manage them carefully. Whereas if you have the bird symbol, you can migrate up to 2 tiles away. So you can bring up 7, and again, they can go anywhere you like, again, on the board, but you have to be aware of the fact that they have to move from one space. So here could be one of those 7 movements, for example. So it's all about you're moving where they want to go. It's not about bringing them out, it's about moving them. So that's just a clarification. I would bring up my error video at this point, perhaps. So migrating, again, is all about, as it says, migration. You're moving to where you think you are now going to be competing. So typically your opponent's going to be competing somewhere else, so you might want to move into their location. But at the same time, you want to be dominance, which I know I'm building up to, is how you're going to deal with this over down here. Now we move on to competition. So this is where you are going to be removing things. So come on to what the spiders do, that's their ability. But you're going to be removing your action point token, and at least one of that species who you're competing against has to be there that you're going to be dealing with. So this one, you'll be looking into the jungle and the wetlands. So you're going to find out where a jungle and a wetland tile is. And what you're going to be doing is eliminating one of the opposing species on each of those chosen tiles. So if you do that, then it's going to be one from here, one from here. If you did forest and savannah, you're removing one from savannah and forest, whatever it might be. You've just got to make sure that you can pick, obviously, which one you're doing. So you might lose one from here, one from here. But with spiders, they can always have one free action point. So they're always going to be removing species from here. And again, they're going to be eliminating that species cube, and it's going to go back in the box, out of play, again, not going back into the gene pool. So that's how competition's working. As you can see, we are now on to the lovely part called domination, whereby there's 5 spots available. And once you've completed all the above actions, you're now going to see how many species are present on the tile to gain victory points. So to gain victory points, there must be another opposing force in there. And now we're going to go through and calculate what the domination is. So what's my domination here? Well, I've got 1, 2, and I've got 2. So if I happen to be here, I have 0 domination. I could have 20 cubes here. The person could have 1. I have 0 domination because I have not adapted to that terrain. I'm not suitable to it. I'm going to have 0 domination. They might have a symbol 1. So over here, what I have is presently 1, 2 times 1 times 2. I have 4. Why is it 4? This is very confusing to many people, including people I've played it with. There are 2 amounts of adaptation available. Imagine I had 1. That's worth 2 amounts of domination. But as I have 2 of them, I've got 4. If I happen to be somewhere else, so let's just say I happen to have 1 grass token on here, and I happen to be over here, then my domination is 2. If I happen to be over here, my domination is 2, but imagine for some reason at some point I covered this over, which I can choose to do, my domination is 1. Over here, my domination is 2 for this. However, a bit more than 2, because I've got blue water as well. So I've got 2 times 1 is 2. 1 times 1 is 3, and therefore my domination is 3. So compare 3 to someone else. But as we play through various different actions, this is going to change a lot. You're going to have wanderlust, you're going to have competition, which might mean you're no longer in a section. The various things that's going to trigger things to move around. You're going to have abundance, increasing the amount of domination you can get, which is why I recommend using dice to say, well, currently my domination is 3, for example. And you can stack them up. I've had like 12 domination, if possible. And it's like, where do you want to fight over? And just be aware those dice can then fall over and whatever. So it is important to be aware of that concept. It is the most annoying part of the game. Someone tried to build a calculator for this, which I think is useful. Some people said you're adding these things to what's on your board, which doesn't make sense. It's obviously a multiplier, but sometimes you're using calculators to figure out all that kind of stuff too. However, that's just the start of domination. So if you happen to have the most, then you are going to get the topmost points. The next person is going to get the next most points and working downwards. So that makes sense. In a tie, again, it's all about who's higher up in this track over here. So that's how that's going to go. You're going to go through all the different scoring. But as you can see, if I am currently dominant, that's helpful to note by having a cone. So you can see I'm dominant because you're comparing it to other people. With more players, it's going to take a long time to, again, constantly keep checking on that, which is why I prefer it at a lower player count. Way too much time thinking about how many tiles there are that you're competing over to check. I mean, luckily, in some respects, there's only 6 on here, but you're going to change up and have even more grass. Sometimes you're going to get down to 1 or sometimes 0. And that is how that's going to go. So whoever happens to be the dominant one, though, what they benefit from is they're able to then get a card over here. So then we're going to go through that. So let me just go through it in stern order. We've gone through my victory points. You're going to gain those. If it's one of those terrains other than tundra, the person second highest, as I mentioned, gain VP is equal to that, then that happens too. Then what's going to happen is, if the tile is being scored as a C, we're obviously going to deal with that as well. And then what's happening is, if there's domination on a tile, so whoever's that, they must select and execute one face-up card. So now I can take one of these cards, let's say, and did it. So here we go, I can get an extra cylinder in play. That's a nice one to have. Or there are other things as well, which I might want to play with. Eliminate 1 opposing species on each tile you occupy. That's something else you can do. And then at the end of the round, as we'll see in reset in a second, that's going to go off. And then you're able to then bring out new things for the next round as well. Now, speaking of Omnivore, that is not played in the base game, because if you want to play a shorts game, ignore Omnivore, Parasitism, Immigrants, and also Intelligence, because as you imagine, one more action pawn means that's going to make the game much longer. So make sure you do avoid keeping that in your first game, just to get used to it. So talk about reset, we haven't come over that yet. Reset is on the back of the book, that's on page 20. So extinction, you're going to make sure each turn the mammal will automatically save one of their endangered species from extinction. You're going to go through survival, which is making sure the player with the most species on tundra tiles is in possession of the survival card. So basically, whoever happens to be on a tile with Tundra, they can take that survival card, which we can talk about in a second, but here is the survival card. Give this player to the person with the most Tundra species occupying Tundra tiles. During the reset phase, they're getting bonus points for the number of Tundra tiles you occupy. So that's good to have. Now, if there's a tie, no one gets it. The bottom tile, I did show you that one before, is actually the Ice Age cards. Each animal will score bonus VPs based on the total number of tiles it currently dominates. This will be their last turn. So that's how that's going to work. We're also then going to go through reseed. So everything's going to push down by these arrows. You're going to refill as well. And yeah, slide any action points into the second, third, and fourth spaces on the glaciation. Remove any elements from aggression, depletion, and wanderlust sections. Slide all elements of the wasteland box as well down. Same for abundance and adaptation. Then you draw 4 new elements of the bag over here. 4 more elements at random for abundance and also for wanderlust. And then refill and replace basically these wanderlust tiles. Everything's going to be face up. So, and I'm going to go back to the planning phase. So whoever's in first position is going to place out their first cylinder. What do I think of the game? It's very good. It is long. It is around kind of 4 hours, which I said. I think it could somehow be shorter. I found Marine to be as long, even though it's going to be a swifter game. I very much like venting though in Dominant Species Marine, which I give an 8.5. This one I give, like I said, a 7 out of 10. It is higher than average, my average rating being a 6.4 based on over 2,700 reviews at time of recording. This has still taken 26 minutes to speak so far. Hopefully you found this of interest. As I said, do let me know. This is shared elsewhere, as I mentioned, but of course, if you happen to go through to YouTube, it is the best place. Apologies as well if I felt like I wasn't doing my best job today. There's a bit of convention crowd after Essen, but hopefully you will have found some use out of this, especially, as I said, comparing it with Marine and also use those dice. But speak to you again soon. For now, that has been Dominant Species. Speak to you again. Enjoy the game. Back to the table.